Oil, the lifeblood of modern civilization. It powers our lives, drives economies, and has sparked wars and innovation alike. But how did this black gold rise to dominate the world? From fueling industrial revolutions to shaping geopolitics, this is the story of how oil became the world's most valuable resource, and what might come next. Join us as we uncover the power, the impact, and the future of oil. Part 1. The Geological Miracle of Oil. Oil's story began millions of years ago, a product of the Earth's unique geological and biological history. When plants and microscopic organisms, like plankton and algae, thrived in oceans and swamps, they absorbed energy from the sun. Upon their death, these organisms settled to the seabed or lake floors, forming thick organic layers. These layers, rich in carbon and hydrogen, were then buried under sedimentary rock. Over time, immense pressure and heat caused these organic layers to transform chemically, breaking down into hydrocarbons. This process, known as thermal decomposition, required conditions that only the Earth's geological activity could provide. The resulting hydrocarbons migrated upwards, accumulating in porous rocks beneath impermeable layers, forming oil reservoirs. This geological phenomenon isn't uniform. Oil fields vary in size, depth, and composition, with some yielding lighter, more valuable crude oil, while others produce heavy, viscous oils or natural gas. From the Middle East to Siberia and the Gulf of Mexico, each region tells a unique story of oil's creation and discovery. Part 2. Prehistoric oil seeps and ancient uses. Long before oil was recognized as a strategic resource, it seeped to the Earth's surface, intriguing early humans. These natural seeps were particularly common in regions like Mesopotamia, where ancient societies stumbled upon oil's practical uses. In Babylon, tar like bitumen was used as a binding material in construction, allowing engineers to create watertight structures. The famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, may have relied on bitumen to prevent water leakage. Meanwhile, in ancient China, oil seeps were harnessed in primitive yet ingenious ways. Bamboo poles were used to drill wells over 240 meters deep to extract oil for lighting and heating. Indigenous peoples of North America utilized surface oil for medicinal purposes and as a sealant for waterproofing canoes. Although these uses were localized, they showcased humanity's ingenuity in harnessing natural resources. However, oil's true potential would remain untapped for millennia, waiting for the rise of industrial civilization. Part 3. The role of oil in industrial energy. The 19th century was marked by unprecedented advancements in technology and energy use, heralding the Industrial Revolution. While coal powered the steam engines that revolutionized transportation and manufacturing, it was oil that eventually captured the world's imagination. In 1846, Canadian geologist Abraham Gesner distilled a liquid from coal and oil shale, naming it kerosene. This new fuel quickly gained popularity as a replacement for whale oil, which was expensive and dwindling in supply. Kerosene's affordability and efficiency made it the preferred choice for lighting homes and businesses. The breakthrough came in 1859 when Edwin Drake successfully drilled the first modern oil well in Titusville, Pennsylvania. Drake's methods, using an iron pipe to prevent well collapses, ushered in the era of commercial oil extraction. Overnight, Pennsylvania became a hotspot for oil production, drawing thousands of prospectors and transforming sleepy towns into booming oil hubs. Part 4. The industrial rise of Standard Oil. By the late 19th century, oil had transformed from a niche commodity into a cornerstone of industrial society. At the forefront of this transformation was John D. Rockefeller and his company, Standard Oil. Founded in 1870, Standard Oil set the benchmark for modern corporate efficiency and monopoly power. Rockefeller's strategy was revolutionary. He sought to control every stage of the oil supply chain, from extraction and refining to transportation and marketing. This vertical integration allowed Standard Oil to lower costs dramatically, undercut competitors, and dominate the market. By the 1880s, Standard Oil controlled over 90% of U.S. oil refining capacity. The company's influence extended beyond the oil fields, shaping policies and infrastructure. Pipelines, railroads, and storage facilities were built to support Rockefeller's vision, forever changing the landscape of energy distribution. However, this dominance came at a cost. Critics 1911, the U.S. Supreme Court ordered the breakup of Standard Oil into 34 smaller companies, marking a turning point in corporate regulation. Despite its dismantling, Standard Oil's legacy lived on in companies like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP, which remained major players in the global oil market. Rockefeller himself became one of history's richest individuals, further solidifying oil's role as a generator of immense wealth and power. Part 5: The rise of the internal combustion engine and oil's central role. The turn of the 20th century introduced a technological marvel that would forever tie oil to human progress: the internal combustion engine. Unlike steam engines that relied on coal, internal combustion engines burned liquid fuels like gasoline, a byproduct of oil refining, to produce motion more efficiently. German engineer Carl Benz created the first practical automobile powered by an internal combustion engine in 1885, but it was Henry Ford's Model T in 1908 that revolutionized transportation. Ford's assembly line production methods made cars affordable for ordinary people, and gasoline demand soared. This transformation went beyond transportation. Oil-powered trucks, tractors, and other machines that revolutionized agriculture and logistics. Entire industries, from road construction to tourism, emerged, driving economic growth and reshaping the physical landscape of nations. Highways connected cities, suburbs sprawled outward, and oil became synonymous with mobility and progress. Part 6: Oil's strategic role in world wars. World War I marked the first major conflict where oil played a pivotal role in military strategy. Mechanized vehicles, tanks, trucks, and airplanes relied on oil, making access to petroleum supplies a strategic necessity. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, famously converted the British Navy from coal to oil, boosting the fleet's speed and range. By World War II, oil's significance had grown exponentially. The Axis powers, Germany and Japan, faced severe oil shortages, influencing their military strategies. Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union aimed to capture the oil fields of the Caucasus, while Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor was partly motivated by US oil embargoes. On the Allied side, access to vast oil reserves in the United States and the Middle East provided a decisive advantage. Oil fueled the tanks, planes, and ships that ultimately secured victory. The war underscored oil's strategic importance, embedding it firmly into the calculus of global power dynamics. Part 7: The Middle Eastern oil boom. While oil production in the United States dominated the early 20th century, the discovery of vast reserves in the Middle East shifted the global energy landscape. In 1938, oil was discovered in Saudi Arabia's Dammam field, marking the beginning of the region's oil dominance. Over the following decades, countries like Kuwait, Iran, and Iraq uncovered immense reserves, often exceeding those in the Western world. Western oil companies, collectively known as the Seven Sisters, controlled much of the production, reaping enormous profits through concessions that heavily favored foreign corporations. This dynamic began to change as nationalist movements swept through the region in the mid-20th century. Governments sought to renegotiate terms, demanding a greater share of profits and eventually nationalizing their oil industries. In Saudi Arabia, for instance, the state-owned Saudi Aramco became the world's largest oil company, holding nearly a quarter of the planet's proven reserves. Part 8: The oil crises of the 1970s. The 1970s brought the world face to face with the vulnerabilities of its dependence on oil. The 1973 oil embargo by Arab members of OPEC was a response to Western support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Overnight, oil prices quadrupled, triggering fuel shortages, inflation, and economic stagnation in oil-importing nations. Governments scrambled to respond. The US introduced measures like rationing, speed limits, and strategic oil reserves, while Japan and European countries accelerated investments in energy efficiency and alternative fuels. The second shock came in 1979, during the Iranian Revolution. Political upheaval in one of the world's largest oil producers disrupted global supply chains, causing another surge in prices. These crises highlighted the geopolitical risks of oil dependence and spurred efforts to diversify energy sources, though oil remained firmly entrenched in the global economy. Part 9: The expansion of petrochemicals. While oil was primarily valued for its role in energy production, the 20th century saw its diversification into countless other industries through petrochemicals. By breaking down crude oil into its molecular components, scientists discovered a treasure trove of applications. Petrochemicals became the foundation of modern manufacturing, producing plastics, synthetic fibers, fertilizers, and pharmaceuticals. Nylon, polyester, and countless other materials owe their existence to oil, reshaping industries from fashion to agriculture. The Green Revolution, which increased global food production, relied heavily on oil-derived fertilizers and pesticides. By the late 20th century, nearly every aspect of modern life was touched by petrochemicals, ensuring that oil's influence extended far beyond energy. Its versatility made it indispensable, cementing its status as the backbone of the global economy. Part 10. The environmental consequences of oil. As humanity reaped the benefits of oil, the environmental costs became increasingly apparent. The extraction, refinement, and burning of oil have had profound impacts on ecosystems and the climate. Oil spills, like the 1989 Exxon Valdez spill in Alaska and the 2010 Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, caused massive ecological devastation. These events highlighted the risks of offshore drilling and transportation, sparking global outrage and stricter regulations. Meanwhile, the combustion of oil products is a leading source of greenhouse gas emissions, driving global warming. Urban air pollution, caused by vehicle emissions, has become a major health hazard in cities worldwide. Despite growing awareness and efforts to transition to renewable energy, oil's dominance continues. Its versatility and affordability make it difficult to replace, presenting a complex challenge for governments, industries, and consumers. Part 11. Oil in the 21st century. Today, oil remains the lifeblood of the global economy, powering transportation, industries, and geopolitics. The rise of shale oil, particularly in the United States, has reshaped markets, making the US a leading oil exporter and challenging traditional producers like OPEC. Technological advancements, such as deepwater drilling and hydraulic fracturing, have unlocked previously inaccessible reserves, extending oil's relevance into the future. However, these methods come with significant environmental and social costs, including water contamination, seismic activity, and community displacement. As nations confront the realities of climate change, the transition to cleaner energy sources has gained momentum. Electric vehicles, renewable power, and hydrogen fuel cells represent the future, but the road ahead is fraught with challenges. Oil remains deeply embedded in global infrastructure, ensuring that its story is far from over. Part 12. The role of oil in modern geopolitics and global conflict. In the modern era, oil continues to wield immense geopolitical power, often serving as both a catalyst for conflict and a tool of diplomacy. Control over oil reserves has shaped the foreign policies of both producers and consumers, with nations vying for influence over this critical resource. One stark example is the Gulf War of 1991. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, it wasn't merely an act of territorial aggression, it was an attempt to control Kuwait's vast oil reserves, which would have given Iraq unprecedented leverage in the global oil market. The US-led coalition's intervention was driven not just by the desire to liberate Kuwait but also by the need to secure global oil supplies and stabilize markets. Oil-rich regions like the Middle East remain hotspots of tension. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of the world's oil passes, has become a flashpoint for naval confrontations. Similarly, disputes over oil-rich territories like the South China Sea highlight the enduring role of oil in international relations. In addition to fueling conflicts, oil has also been used as a tool of economic warfare. Sanctions on major oil-producing nations like Iran, Venezuela, and Russia have had far-reaching consequences, impacting global markets and diplomatic relations. The weaponization of oil highlights its dual role as both an economic asset and a political lever. Part 13. Technological innovations in oil exploration and extraction. The quest for oil has driven remarkable technological innovations, enabling companies to find and extract oil in even the most challenging environments. Advances in seismic imaging, for example, have allowed geologists to map underground reservoirs with precision, reducing the risks and costs of exploration. Offshore drilling, once considered impossible, has become a cornerstone of the modern oil industry. The construction of massive rigs in regions like the North Sea and the Gulf of Mexico has unlocked billions of barrels of oil. These engineering marvels, often located miles from shore and in deep waters, symbolize humanity's determination to extract every last drop of this resource. Hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, revolutionized oil production in the 21st century, particularly in the United States. By injecting high-pressure fluid into rock formations, companies were able to release oil and natural gas trapped in shale. This technique led to the US shale boom, transforming the country into a net exporter of oil and reshaping global energy markets. However, these technologies come with significant risks. Offshore drilling has led to catastrophic oil spills, while fracking has been linked to groundwater contamination and seismic activity. Balancing the need for energy with environmental protection remains a critical challenge for the oil industry. Part 14. The economic influence of oil. Oil's economic impact extends far beyond the energy sector. As a key driver of industrialization and globalization, it has shaped national economies, corporate empires, and financial systems. For oil-producing nations, the resource has been both a blessing and a curse. Countries like Saudi Arabia and Norway have used oil revenues to build modern infrastructures and establish sovereign wealth funds, ensuring long-term financial stability. However, others, such as Venezuela and Nigeria, have struggled with the resource curse, where dependence on oil revenue leads to economic instability, corruption, and social unrest. Oil prices also play a critical role in the global economy. Fluctuations in prices can trigger inflation, recession, or growth, depending on a nation's level of dependence. For instance, the oil price collapse of 2014, driven by oversupply and declining demand, sent shockwaves through oil-dependent economies, forcing them to cut budgets and devalue currencies. Meanwhile, oil companies are among the largest and most powerful corporations in the world. Their influence extends beyond the energy sector, impacting geopolitics, trade, and even climate policy. ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Saudi Aramco, among others, have shaped the global economy, but their role in climate change has made them targets of increasing scrutiny and activism. Part 15. Environmental advocacy and the push for renewable energy. As the environmental impact of oil becomes increasingly apparent, advocacy for a transition to renewable energy has grown louder. Movements like the Paris Agreement have set ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, with many nations pledging to phase out fossil fuels in favor of cleaner alternatives. Renewable energy sources such as wind, solar, and hydroelectric power have made significant strides in recent decades. The cost of solar panels and wind turbines has plummeted, making them competitive with oil in many regions. Meanwhile, innovations in battery technology and grid storage have addressed the intermittent nature of renewables, paving the way for a more sustainable energy future. Electric vehicles, EVs, represent another major shift. With companies like Tesla leading the charge, EVs are poised to replace gasoline-powered cars, reducing oil demand. Governments around the world are investing in EV infrastructure, with some planning to ban the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles within the next few decades. However, the transition is not without challenges. Oil remains deeply embedded in global supply chains, from aviation and shipping to petrochemicals and plastics. Breaking this dependence will require not just technological innovation but also political will and significant investment. Part 16. Oil's place in a changing world. Despite the growing momentum toward renewable energy, oil's dominance is far from over. The International Energy Agency predicts that global oil demand will continue to rise in the short term, driven by developing economies in Asia and Africa. For these nations, oil represents an opportunity to industrialize and improve living standards, much like it did for the West in the 20th century. However, this development comes at a cost, as increased oil consumption exacerbates climate change and environmental degradation. Meanwhile, oil companies are adapting to the changing landscape. Many are investing in renewable energy projects and exploring technologies like carbon capture and storage to reduce emissions. Some have even rebranded themselves as energy companies, signaling a shift toward a more diversified future. Who has the most oil in the world? Oil reserves are not evenly distributed across the globe, and a few nations dominate the charts. Venezuela holds the largest proven reserves, over 300 billion barrels, though political and economic turmoil have left much of it untapped. Saudi Arabia, with around 267 billion barrels, remains the world's most influential oil powerhouse, thanks to its state-owned giant, Aramco. Nigeria, Africa's largest oil producer, boasts over 37 billion barrels of reserves. Oil is the backbone of its economy, accounting for over 90% of export revenues. However, challenges like corruption, environmental degradation in the Niger Delta, and political instability have hindered its potential. The United States, while not holding the largest reserves, leads global production through technological advancements in shale oil extraction. Meanwhile, countries like Iraq, Iran, and Canada complete the list of major players, each with unique challenges and opportunities. Together, these nations control the lifeblood of modern civilization, but with the rise of renewable energy, their dominance faces an uncertain future. The story of oil is far from over. As the world grapples with the twin challenges of energy security and climate change, oil will remain at the center of the global conversation, shaping economies, societies, and the planet for generations to come. Oil is more than just a resource. It is a force that has shaped our world in profound ways. From fueling industrialization to driving geopolitics, from powering cars to creating plastics, its impact is unparalleled. But as we stand at the crossroads of history, the question remains: can humanity transition to a sustainable future while still dependent on this finite, powerful resource? Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history and legacy of oil. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth stories about the forces that shape our world.